Hello everybody, and welcome once again to a fun Friday. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, hasn't it? But, well, it's been a busy few weeks, and so I haven't had the chance to do as much painting and modelling as I'd like, but nonetheless, we are back with Dystopian Wars. Warcradle very kindly has sent me this little fleet, which you can see here. This is the Hypatia battle fleet. So this is the second, well, technically third release for the Antarctican faction. The first one being that they are one half of the starter player box set. The second one being obviously the release of the ships that were in that box set but as their own standalone force. And this is the first expansion. So this follows a similar pattern to the expansions that have been done that you've seen already for the Russians and for the Germans, in that it provides a new series of ships on the same model line, so modular, plastic frigates and cruisers, and then a resin battleship. So with all that said, let's take a look and see what you get in the box. So here's the standard Hypatia battle fleet set box, named after the Hypatia battleship, which is one of the two battleships you saw originally in the starting faction box set. This is the one that doesn't carry the attack whales, although they do feature in the box set nevertheless. So you can see you get two plastic sprues, each of which contains the components to build up to 3 of the smaller vessels and 1 cruiser. So you have a total of 2 cruisers and 6 smaller hulls, and of course the cruiser hulls are modular, and in fact these ones are very modular compared to some. I mean, we've been through a number and you will have seen that some of the cruisers, obviously they can all be built in different formats, but some of them are actually much easier to build and then rebuild, if you like, into lots of different formats using the same components, whereas others perhaps you need to, because of structural reasons, fix them together. So you've got a lot of choice initially, but you're a bit more restricted in what you're actually going to get out of at the other end. But these ones are probably one of, if not the most easily interchangeable cruisers so far. Now, the escorts are the small ships. They are, in fact, submarines. So they introduce submarines into the game in the new Warcradle format, and you can see there's also a couple of tokens. So there's a small set of 3 drones on one token, and there is the attack whale, the cyber whale, and in the other token on each sprue. So there's them making their entrance in that location. And of course, there is the Hypatia battleship, after which the box set is named. So you will have seen this one before. So this is the one that has lots of slots for weapons batteries and generators of various descriptions. So you've got 1 weapons turret slot forward, 1 on each side, and then you've got 3 generator slots, 1 just in front of the bridge and 2 on each side forward, plus probably a few other bits and pieces. You've got the secondary batteries there, all clustering around the port and starboard primary weapons platforms. And it's a fairly simple build, the battleship, but we'll see that all in a second. So here we go. Instructions, as always, are from PDFs online, which is how Warcradle distribute the instruction manuals. There's also a QR code on the box, so you can scan that and go find it. And as you can see, the battleship assembly is pretty easy, but as I said in the previous video where I've painted one of these ships, I do strongly recommend that you paint the individual components either on sprue or clip them off the sprue and paint them independently before you attach them, because as you can see, those 2 clamshell components do cover over a good part of the funnel. So if you want to actually paint the entirety of the model, you will have to do that separately. The bridge module that sits on top of the bridge column, again, it's easier to paint that separately. I guess you can get away with painting it once it's stuck on, but it will make it a little bit harder to access. And you can see on the bottom left the 3 primary weapons platforms. You can have either the molecule agitators or the particle beamers, and then various generators on the generator slots. The submarines come in two separate flavours, both using the same common hull. It's just a matter of switching the nose around. These are the Praxilla and Diogenes classes. Now, whilst it might look like it's fairly easy to just build the hulls and then swap noses around, and yes, in theory you could do that, in practice I would probably recommend picking one and then sticking with that, because it's got a little flange to make sure it stays in the right place, but swapping these in and out just by pressure fit is not really going to work. If you do like your magnets, and okay, fair enough, I like my magnets when it comes to building ships as well, then you could definitely put a magnet or two on the underside of the hull there and magnetize the noses, and then you can swap them out pretty easily. But to be honest, given how many of these little things you're going to end up with and the fact they're fairly quick and easy to put together, I'd probably keep them as single-use models once you've decided which one you want to have. And then that brings us on to the cruiser. Now, don't be too intimidated by this slightly complicated looking set of instructions. Again, it's relatively easy to put together, and actually in this particular instance, unlike the battleship, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to actually paint all of these components separately. They stick together in such a way that painting them after the fact, obviously undercoat them first, is actually a relatively doable thing. The way I would suggest you follow the instructions would be to put the main engine block I component 2 there on first, because that provides you with 3 points of support for the engine grills on either side. That's components 3 and 4, as opposed to just the one kind of curving support section you get if you haven't put that on already. And then with the bridge section, I would recommend you actually do this in 3 steps. So take the central bridge module, attach parts 6 and 7 first loosely. If you're using poly cement, that's probably the best. Then either attach 8 and 9 together onto the hull, or possibly put 8 and 9 on to the bridge itself and then put the whole lot on. The only reason I say you might need a bit of flexibility is that it can take just a fraction of practice to work out exactly what angle to put component 6 on in order to allow the 2 clamshells to close. But once you do it properly, it's a fairly self-contained unit and it drops in nicely on the bridge. So that's all good. And as you can see, there are in fact 4 variants of the cruiser that you can have, although they've accidentally printed the same name twice. So it is in fact the Plinius class, the Quintilian class, or Quintillian class, that's the one that's been printed twice, the Claudius class, and the Tacticus class. So going a little bit Roman there. And where these cruisers vary are their side weapon bays and what goes on the stern platform there. So this is the Plinius class cruiser. So this is the aircraft carrier. So you will have seen the Germans, they have that kind of ski ramp cruiser variant. The Russians have a slightly more conventional light carrier looking variant. And now the Antarcticans have this one, which unlike the others doesn't need a flight deck because they use catapult launched drones. So the drones, as you can see, fold out from the sides. They have the little supports there for the hull plating. And then on the back, where you can spot what should by now be familiar as the generator mount, instead you have another drone fighter, because presumably that's where they land, come in to be recycled. And there's a little crane there to help move them around as well. So this is the Antarctican version of the Flyer, or the Flyer carrier, the aircraft carrier in its small form, which is actually quite interesting because it means that the Antarctican faction currently doesn't have a large carrier, which one or two of the other factions do. Then you have the Quintillion, which is the other slightly more complex version. It's not quite as complex as the Plinius, but nevertheless it still has these sticking out sections where basically the hull has opened up, and in this case, as you can see, it shows that it has missile batteries in place. Now every other version, so the other two plus the Quintillion, they all use this blanking plate instead of the crane mount that was on the Plinius, and then you can put a generator of your choice on the stern there. So this one is the Macross Missile Massacre version. And then you have these two, Claudius and Tacticus. So you can say you can see they're still using the same blank at the back, blanking plate and generator. The difference being that the Claudius class cruiser it just uses those external plates that you saw earlier on the other two, and these ones are just folded in. So I guess you could pretend that this is the Quintillion just with everything folded in, so it's not showing its missile batteries. So this is of course the lightest variant, because all you're going to be carrying there is a generator and those 6 small secondary guns that you can see dotting the hull, plus a pair of torpedo launchers forward, which again is common across all the hulls. And then the Tacticus, or Tacitus maybe, class is kind of at the other end, if you like, in that, as you can see, it carries a pair of mounting points for the heavy weapons. So you have 3 of those on the battleship along with 3 generators. You get 2 of them on the Tacitus class and just the single generator. So it's not quite as heavily armed as the battleship, but it's still probably going to pack a fair old punch, especially when it's attacking all forward, because then you've got the torpedoes and both your primary weapon systems and possibly some of your secondaries that you can bring to bear. Now, for those of you who saw me build the previous set, here's the other Hypatia. You may remember that. And you may remember I messed up slightly because I wanted them to be nice and white to blend in with icebergs, and I accidentally sprayed them with the Wraithbone contrast spray, which made them come out a kind of beige colour. Now, I adapted as best I could, and I wasn't displeased with the results, but they weren't exactly what I was looking for. So this time around, knowing that particular pitfall, I decided I was going to try and do something closer to my original vision, which was actually a white colour scheme, because they are in Antarctica. It will help them blend in with the ice and the snow. And so here is the second Hypatia compared to the first one. Again, following, other than that, roughly the same colour scheme. So you've got the greens and the blues being the dominant colours, other than the decking, which is of course brown. I chose to incorporate a bit more of this green metal onto the bow ridge because that looked better, and maybe you can't quite see it in this picture, but in the next one it might be a little bit more visible. I decided to go with trying to do some panel lining this time with some 0.05mm panel highlighting pen, because I thought that might work out fairly well, given that this particular design of ship has a lot of nice straight indents and joins which lend themselves to panel highlighting, and might work a little bit better than my previous attempts using things like washes and inks and so forth. And that gives it a bit of distinctiveness, apart from just having a very otherwise bland white hull. I think it worked okay. You can see here I switched the generators over to give some idea of what they look like between the two ships. So I'm fairly happy with how that turned out. Although I would give one word of advice. I don't know if it was just me. I don't know if it was just the particular choice of paint that I used. But I used Army Painter White for the undercoat for this new Hypatia battle fleet. And I found that the panel liner pen didn't take too well on the battleship. I can only attribute that to maybe the fact that it's a resin model as opposed to a plastic model rather than the paint, or maybe I sprayed the paint wrong. I did spray the battleship on a separate day to the cruisers, so maybe I put it on too thick, maybe I did something wrong there, but for whatever reason it did take a while to get the panel lining right, or as close to right as I was happy with, on the battleship, as opposed to on these two submarines. You can see I did one of each here, where it's the same undercoat paint, but they're plastic models, and the panel liner took a lot better, at least in my opinion. And I'm generally a lot more happy with this colour scheme than I am with the other one. And here you can see one of the escorts I did for the earlier set, and hopefully you can see the contrast. I'm going, as you can again see, for a broadly similar colour palette, just with a white base instead of a cream base, and hopefully you agree that it works better. And then, of course, the cruisers. So here's one that's complete and one that's incomplete. And once again, hopefully you can see the panel lining. I think it works the absolute best on these cruisers. It really does make them pop and stand out. Did the little drones there with a bit of basilicum grey. And you can see there how the components come together. So you've got the carrier version closer to you. Further away you have the Tacitus, awaiting obviously painting and receiving its modules, but also the missile massacre pods waiting there as well to be just dropped in and out if I need to refit them at all. And here again, compared to one of the models I painted before with the cream base, and once again, I say I'm not unhappy with the previous colour scheme. I think it does work. I just think this new colour scheme works better. So let me know what you think in the comments below about all of that. And that wraps up our look at the Hypatia battle fleet. There's a few more to come for certain when it comes to Dystopian Wars. We've got the Ice Maiden iceberg aircraft carrier I mentioned in a previous video. I'm still painting that. And of course the Britannian battle fleet is out, so naturally you'll be getting a good long look at that at some point over probably some point in the next month or so, once I get them all painted up. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and if you would like to pick up a box set of Dystopian Wars of some description in any way, shape or form, of course it is available from most retailers. Warcradle, of course, the primary source via Wayland Games, but other retailers are available if you so choose. And thanks very much. See you again in another video.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.